So, ladies and gentlemen, this is our closing plenary session of the Global Home Education Exchange Conference of 2024. A lot of work, a lot of preparation, a lot of planning, a lot of travel, a lot of investment has been put into this by all of you, and I want to thank you for that. The preparation of our speakers, the work of our conference committee, the work of all of you in freeing up your time and being able to be here is so important, and I just want to thank you for it. Well, I would like to take and just pause for a moment to acknowledge those that have supported this conference as sponsors. And I'd like to just go through the sponsors, and we have a certificate for each one of the sponsors to, in a small way, to say thank you. But I would just encourage you to, whenever you have an opportunity, pass on to them the importance of what you've received, what you've experienced, what you've gathered, and what you're going to be bringing home as conference participants. So I want to acknowledge the sponsorship of these sponsors, starting with HSLDA of the United States. HSLDA is the organization that certainly has sponsored the conference financially, but also a huge amount of the administration and organizational work of this event is thanks to the staff of HSLDA. So thank you so much. And Kevin and all the staff, we so much appreciate it. Classical Conversations has been a foundational sponsor for this event since the beginning in 2012. And we appreciate so much the support, the help, and the partnership of Classical Conversations. And I know that there's a number of people here. I'm not sure who's in the room. I can't quite make out everybody, but Robert Bortons is the CEO. And if Robert is in the room, if you just want to wave your hand, there he is. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. BGAU Press, and thank you for the sponsorship of this organization. Zan Tyler is here someplace as well. Thank you. Apologia. We have some representation from Apologia here, I believe. I don't see who, but thank you for that support and that help. Home Life Academy, the Parkersons, thank you so much. Homeschool Global, Ryan, Edric, thank you. IEW, Institute of Excellence in Writing, I don't think has any representation here, but we certainly appreciate their support and their partnership. Clonlara School, thank you for your support over the many years, but for this year as well. Memoria Press, thank you. Advocate and their many projects and enterprises, thank you. Pestalozzi Trust, thank you to Karan. I have to keep turning around. Charlotte Mason Institute, thank you. Just want to thank all of our sponsors for their generous support financially as well as their presence here and their participation in the conference. Thank you so much. Our presenters today are going to be talking about Home Education Works. We've been talking about that throughout the conference, but we want to focus even more on advocacy and where we want to lead the homeschool movement. And really the message that we are all advocates. To help us in doing that, my colleague from Canada, Russ Hiebert. Russ Hiebert is a homeschool dad from the west coast of Canada. We serve together on the HSLDA Canada board. Russ is a lawyer, and but most importantly, a homeschool dad. So Russ, come on up. Russ has served 2 terms as a member of Parliament in Canada, so can speak both from the homeschool dad and organizational perspective, but also from the government receipt of advocacy perspective. So Russ, look forward to your remarks.
Thank you, Gerald. Well, as been mentioned, I've been asked to speak on why and how to influence policymakers. So let's see if this thing works. Okay. So who am I and why am I qualified? Well, Gerald touched on a few of those qualifications, but basically I'm a homeschool father of 4 with a few of them represented in the audience today, a former lawyer and politician who was elected 4 times, as a Conservative member of Parliament in Canada, serving almost 12 years. Over the past 13 years, watching our children be home educated all the way through high school, I've become a wholehearted convert to home education and currently serve as a board member of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association in Canada. And it's because of both my political and homeschooling experience that I strongly believe it is important for home educators to get involved in the public policy process to protect and expand their legal rights to educate their children. So, why try to protect and improve the conditions for parents to educate their children? Because it's a worthwhile cause that's good for society. Influencing public policy recognizes and supports the fundamental and primary right of all parents to decide how their children will be educated. As we've heard throughout this conference, there are many jurisdictions, even within Canada, that do not support home education and hinder that right and make it difficult for parents to exercise this right and responsibility. And the degree of freedom that parents have, I believe, is an indicator of the measure of liberty of the place in which they live. At its core, people reflect the policies that exist. In other words, whether there is freedom or hindering regulations is a reflection of the opinions of individuals, like those of the elected representatives and bureaucrats in the Ministry of Education, and therefore those opinions can be reinforced if they're good or changed if they need improving. In most cases, and just as the Apostle Paul claimed his citizenship, you and others can exercise your right to influence the people who determine the education policies in your country. So now that we've established the why to influence, let's talk about who to influence. Which policymakers should you try and influence? Now, some have argued that we should focus on bureaucrats because they are there for the long term, and there is truth to that thinking. My emphasis is going to be to focus on the elected officials because they have the power to change the law and make a lasting impact. And changing the law, while more difficult in the short term, once accomplished, will likely last for a longer period of time. So how do you influence them? Well, this is where I've come up with 14 different ideas on how to influence elected officials as a former politician. Number 1, identify your issue. Clearly define the issue or policy you care about and understand its impact on and why it's important to you and home education. Number 2, research and understand that issue inside and out. Become well-informed about the issue, understand its history, its current status, and potential solutions. Also gather data and evidence to support your position because this is the currency that politicians use to make decisions. Number 3, develop a clear message. Craft a concise and compelling message with ideally a maximum of 3 points that outline the issue, your perspective, and the desired outcome. Be very clear about what you want and are asking for and propose a solution to that problem. Be ready to explain why the policy matters and how it affects the community or local constituents. Take time to explain how home education works in practice. For example, you could explain how it's difficult to comply with certain regulations and how a change in the law could make it easier. And then, number 4, choose your words carefully. If the phrase homeschooling is an impediment or has a negative connotation in your country, perhaps describe it for what it is: parent-directed education. Number 5, identify your elected officials. Determine exactly who it is you need to speak to, and not only your representative. This would also include the Minister of Education, or in some countries, the deputy minister, or in some other countries, the parliamentary secretary for education. Know who it is you need to talk to and their roles and responsibilities. And then build relationships. Foster positive relationships with your elected representatives. Know that it's the personal connections that you have, whether through mutual friends or common interests, that often develop those personal connections. And most importantly, remember that most influence comes through relationship. As such, begin in a friendly way. Smile. It makes a positive first impression. And do not be aggressive, despite the fact that you might be dealing with those that are opposed to your perspective. Be respectful, even with your political adversaries. Give honest and sincere appreciation and recognition when things are done well, as genuine praise does motivate. And take the long view. This is not a short-term game. Number 7, join advocacy groups that share your goals. By working with other home education groups, you can combine resources, strategies, and networks to amplify your efforts. A recent example of that was in Canada, was the Million March for Children that happened in September of 2023. It was initiated by a Muslim group in Ottawa that was upset about what was being taught in local schools. And so they simply proclaimed this event to happen across the country and supported it with some posts and some memes and a website where people could register their local march. And what happened was remarkable. Simply by declaring this is to happen, within 2 months they had hundreds of parents register, and there were marches in almost every city across the country. And hundreds of thousands of people marched in our streets. I've never seen anything like it, where you can simply declare an event and it happened. And in my community, there were 6,000 people, 80% of diverse ethnic backgrounds, that clogged our largest artery in our city in front of the education minister's office and made a powerful declaration. So, what was the result? Well, things are changing, and we're facing an election in many provinces, including my province this fall, and we're expecting a change in this area as well. But this also created a whole new constituency of people who had never before worked together as allies, who are now open to the idea of considering home education because of their dissatisfaction with public schooling. Number 8, engage in grassroots organizing. Mobilize fellow citizens who share your concerns. Grassroots movements can have a significant impact on elected officials because they dramatically get their attention. Some of you may have heard about Canada's Freedom Convoy that was held in February of 2022 during COVID. This was another example of a grassroots initiative with no formal leadership behind it, just individuals who made a bold declaration and invited people to join them. As in Canada, grassroots events can reshape the political landscape. So invite participation, and you will multiply your efforts and get more people focused on influencing their local representatives. Number 9. This one's titled The Hierarchy of Influence. And while doing something is better than nothing, there is a hierarchy to influence, from least to most influential. The 5th most influential or least thing that you can do is send an email, especially a template email. It's better than doing nothing, but unless it's from a verified constituency or constituent, it will usually be ignored. The 4th most effective thing is to send in a template mailed letter. Now, this has the benefit of being physical in that it shows up in their office and can have an impact, especially when it's stacked along with a lot of others. And it's harder to ignore, but it usually results at most in a template response. The 3rd most effective way to influence is to send a personalized letter, and this usually generates a personalized response. And it takes the time of the staff or the individual representative to consider and to reply, and it can have an impact, especially if it's from, and almost only if it's from a constituent. The second most effective way is a phone call. And this is really the best way to set up the best way to meet, which we'll talk about next. And it's also a great way to follow up after a personal meeting, or to set the groundwork or provide some additional or initial information for the upcoming meeting. But by far, hands down, the most influential way that you can impact an elected representative is to meet with them in person. So let's talk about what that would look like. You want to start by measuring your expectations. Don't expect to meet in the Capitol because that's probably where they're most busy and have other responsibilities to attend to. But if you can, meet in their constituency, and don't expect a lot of their time, maximum 20 to 30 minutes. Be nice to their staff, because their staff can determine whether you get a meeting or not. And if they're treated badly, they will certainly talk about how they were treated, and that will have an impact on your success as well. But here comes the most important point, and that is bring other people with you. There's something about small group dynamics that changes when 2, 3, or more individuals attend that kind of a meeting. It's far more difficult for the elected representative to dismiss your views when they know that you are representative of a larger group as presented to them in person. My first contact with homeschoolers was very similar to that as I've just described. It was homeschool parents and students coming to my office asking thoughtful questions in a very respectful manner, and it left a very positive impression. It was a contrast to my experience in going to public schools, where I did not have that similar experience. And so it really does make a difference. Then, the next thing you can do, and this happens a lot in the United States, and not so much in Canada, but I'm encouraging it to happen everywhere, is organize capital days. Organize an annual day where you organize your home-educated students to gather and meet a whole bunch of policy leaders at the same time, and make it an annual event so they become to expect your attendance. And when you have those meetings with them, make sure that you align your interests with their interests. Do not only focus on your rights, talk in terms of how your policy proposals are good for society and will benefit even the government. Most of the people that you're talking to are wanting to do what's best for society and so that they can get reelected. So show them how adopting your policy will help them succeed at that goal. You can talk about how it promotes freedom for parents, or how it respects parents' rights, or how there will be fewer students in the public school system, taking fewer resources and lowering the student-teacher ratio in the public school classrooms. There's many arguments that you can make, but make sure that you align your interests with their interests. And then you can go above and beyond. And I have experienced this personally, where people who had a keen interest in a particular policy would attend my events, or in some cases become campaign workers on my campaign. And what that would do is it engenders a sense of reciprocity. When people do things for you, you automatically want to do things for them. So when you have campaign workers that you've become familiar with, you now want to see opportunities where you can assist them. And that's where you can have a lot of influence. Of course, some associations do this, but you can also more directly participate in public hearings, attend the meetings and the legislative sessions where the issues are being discussed. You can prepare testimony, and if allowed, share your perspective. You can also support and oppose legislation. Again, tracking relevant bills and supporting and opposing them, and encouraging others to do the same by notifying your elected representatives about your opinion can truly make a difference. And now, taking it to the higher level, exercise your right to vote in elections and motivate others to find candidates who align with your policy goals. And if you can't find those candidates, then recruit them. And if you can't recruit them, consider being the candidate. Because in a representative democracy, every one of us has the freedom and right to participate in public service. Keep in mind that you need to stay persistent in this game. It often takes a long time. to bring about change. And that's not only because of the policy process, but it takes time for elected officials to consider the evidence, to evaluate it, to respond to it, especially if they're complex issues. And then lastly, number 14, celebrate your achievements. Acknowledge and thank the elected officials when they support your policy goals, because positive reinforcement can definitely strengthen your relationship. So in conclusion, I speak from personal experience that applying these suggestions will increase your likelihood of success when promoting freedom for parent-directed education in your country. Thank you for your attention.
Russ, thank you for that, what I think is a very valuable, very important presentation and the information. Our next presenter is Ann Charles. Ann has already spoken to us. We heard from her as a homeschool graduate, now an adult, and she's going to be talking to us about two projects that she's involved in that apply to advocacy when it comes to home education. And Ann, I look forward to your sharing about the Home Education Law Project and the Joy Baker Fund.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And talking about thanking officials, thanks very much. That was an amazing session. That was so helpful. I'm here with my British organisation hats on. Where's my clicker gone? Oh, thank you. Thanks to my glamorous assistant. This is hopefully useful for everybody, but particularly so there's kind of two main audience members I'd like to speak to. Firstly, anyone here who is British or is based in the UK. And secondly, any millionaires who haven't mentioned it, because we are looking for some funding. So the political context that we have in the UK at the moment is, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but basically we had the dawn of time when people educated their children in their families and in their communities, and that was perfectly normal. And then over the years, the kind of mass schooling system came in. And then we've been, ever since then, facing increasing challenges to our ability to home educate or to educate in ways that are different from the schooling system. So in the 1950s, we had a lady called Joy Baker who came from Norfolk in the UK, and she was one of the first people of like the modern era of home education in this country. And she was home educating her children, and she felt she should be able to bring up her children and to teach them the things that she felt it was useful for them to know. And she was really persecuted by her local council, dragged through the courts repeatedly, had her children taken away from her. And then she got them back eventually, but it was, very stressful for everyone. And then during the 70s, Education Otherwise, which is our big national charity here, was set up. And then during the 70s and the 80s, various different acts and case law and case law and different things have happened that have kind of shaped the legislative framework that we have. So as we've gone on more and more towards 2024, we've just had more and more challenges to what's going on, more government consultations, local councils behaving quite badly towards home educating families. The law is slightly different across the 4 nations of the UK, so each area kind of takes turn at being the worst for home educators for a while. They kind of pass it around in a baton. And we've just had a change of government, so we kind of wait to see what's going to happen there. But there's been this sort of increasing narrative against home education and increasing bad behaviour of paid officials, even though the legal framework we have in this country is actually quite well thought through, and it balances human rights and the rights of a child to make sure that they are protected and safe and receive an education, with the right of a family to have a private family life. So the legal structure we have here is really good. We just need people to actually know what it is and follow it. So a lot of us who are involved in home education groups in different ways, we're seeing these problems coming up over the years and going, well, what can we do about this? Because we really need to tackle these issues. So 2 of the things we're seeing are paid officials who are paid to administer the law, who do not understand what the law actually is, and then they start panicking because they think they have duties and responsibilities they don't have. So that's one of the issues we have, officials who do not know what the law is, and then that translates to politicians who hear from these local council officials and then start thinking they've got to create legislation that they don't need to. And then we also have, so families are getting harassed on a local level. And then we also have the issue of it's very hard to make a complaint against a local authority who's getting the law wrong. So you can complain and maybe they might change their behaviour. But if you want to then take that complaint further because they haven't dealt with it, if you go to the Ombudsman here, the Ombudsman will only look at what the local council's policy is and whether they were following the policy. They won't look at whether the policy was lawful. And if you want to challenge whether the policy was lawful, then you have to do a thing called judicial review. And that starts at about £20,000 or £30,000. Which isn't the kind of money that most home educators have. Again, if you are the kind of home educator who has that to spare, do come and see me after. So we were like, right, what are we going to do? So but just before the pandemic started, a group of home educating organisations came together and said a lot of what we need to do isn't actually in our current remit. So we need to start a new organisation, and it turned into being 2 organisations. So we have 2 organisations that are still quite new and we're still getting ourselves together. So one is Home Education Law Project, and the idea of that is to educate professionals in home education law and pedagogy. So we'll be training local authority officials, social workers, and also we want to talk to solicitors and barristers to make sure we've got more people who are legally trained and understand our niche kind of area of law to do with home education. So that's kind of one thing, and we really want to involve the home educating community in that training to make sure everyone knows what we are training people, and that it's all really open and transparent with the community, because obviously no one can speak on behalf of the home educating community, and anyone who says they can, you shouldn't trust. We're all very different. So that's kind of one of the ideas, that we can kind of nip some of these problems in the bud by reassuring officials that they do have power to intervene if they need to, but most of the time they don't, and protecting our human rights and the legal structure we have, because it's actually a really good legal structure if you think it through and you follow it. And then the other thing we've got is a charity called Joy Baker Fund. So Joy Baker Fund, named after Joy Baker, because she was a pioneer for us, and it kind of honours all families who stand up and fight for their home education rights. And this will be providing grants to families who need help with legal assistance, especially if it's getting to that level where you might need a barrister's opinion or a judicial review, because like a barrister's opinion would probably start at about £5,000 or £6,000, and that can sometimes nip some problems in the bud as well. And if you do, we don't want anyone to have to take a court case. That's the very, very last resort. But if we do, then we should have some funding available for that. I say should have. We've got approximately £400 in the bank account at the moment, so we need to build up the fundraising. But that would be the plan. Joy Baker Fund would be providing grants. So we want to recruit a really diverse range of home educators in the UK to administer the grants and to review the application. As a charity, it would not be taking court cases itself. It would be funding people who would be placed in financial hardship if they can't access legal support. And unlike organisations like HTSL, that one, it's a good acronym, but I can never get the letters out. HSDL. We're not an insurance scheme, so it's not like you have in the States where everyone pays in and then you're definitely going to get covered. It would be a grant-giving organisation. And obviously, as a charity, we're absolutely not political in any way, shape or form. Heaven forfend the very idea that we would be. So a lot of work has gone into it. The reason it's taken 5 years is because there was a pandemic in the middle. We've had quite a lot of government inquiries and things that we've had to respond to. And then there was a long session with the Charity Commission, during which we broke the guy in charge, because apparently we got flagged as high risk and complex, and we had to go through a whole other level. And at the end of the conversation with us, he said, I can see this is a very complicated area of law, and you are all clearly the experts. What do you think I should write here? And then the next day we were registered, so that's how we're going. So yes, very happy to talk to anyone about this afterwards. As I say, if you have any spare cash you want to give it to us, please do, and have a lovely rest of the conference. Thank you very much.
And thank you so much, and exciting things and opportunities here in the United Kingdom. Our next presenter is also from this area. Alison Sauer has been involved in advocacy in home education for many years, and we so much appreciate Alison's partnership and help as part of planning this conference and being integrally involved in that. And she'll be talking to us about advocacy in Britain. Alison.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to go a little bit broader than home education, only because we have such a fight on our hands. Well, you'll see where I'm going with this. It's not a very long talk. Okay, so home education works. We know this, but how do we get other people outside of this wonderful, supportive community that's here today to understand? Moreover, is the problem actually associated with other issues? Can those issues be tackled and the results filtered into our drive and our message? Home education has not yet reached a critical mass in Europe. That critical mass would mean that we would have a real voice. We are not a protected community like an ethnic or religious minority might be. So what do? We also, in the UK, have the additional threat of the unique identifying number. I don't know if any of you have seen that that's coming in. Our new government are intending to attach a unique identifying number to every child in the UK. This will further dehumanise the children in this country and will allow vast amounts of data to be shared. It will lead to more metadata-driven policy rather than policy driven by the evidence of our lived experience as families with our children, teaching our children, parenting our children. So in our fight for our freedom, and indeed in our fight for the health, safety and security of our children, we would do well to remember that there's a rule. And that rule is the 3.5% rule from Erica Cherworth, Professor of Human Rights at Harvard. Basically what she says is that no revolutions have failed once 3.5% of the population has actively participated in an observable fashion. Now, we're talking about non-violent protest here. We're talking about subversive stuff. We're talking about the quiet revolution stuff. So what we need to do is we need to shift the fight in Europe a little to one of parental responsibility, of which home education is a huge part for us. We know parents that are enabled and supported to be truly responsible for their children do a fantastic job, not least because they are the experts on their own children. Bringing up children, including home educating them and creating a happy, healthy and productive next generation should be a priority, especially given the disasters we are seeing across Europe with mental health, special educational needs and appalling education standards. We have to go back to parents being responsible for children rather than the state. We have to again engage in something called the cognitive liberation of our neighbours. We do this by fighting the drive against humanity, against humility, against parenting, family and natural development. We have to support and create research that shows that parental responsibility, family life and home education actually works. Home education works where it is chosen by families, as I said the other day, and home education works where state education does not. For the sake of our children, government must also look to the damage the state system is causing in many cases and fix that, rather than drive to overregulate and interfere with families doing the very best for their children. Thank you.
Alison, thank you. Our next presenter is a special guy that did some special things here at this conference. Joel Gruey is with HSLDA in the United States, and Joel has led the Generation Joshua, which is a youth activism program for many years. And I don't know how many of you poked your head into the room where the youth were, but it was exciting. It was truly exciting. It was a world-class event. And I've asked Joel if he could just share with us a little bit of what happened and what he saw. Joel, first of all, thank you for coming here and for being the leader of this program, bringing your staff, and for bringing Generation Joshua to this conference. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. All right.
I will be brief. I apologize. I did not have entirely prepared remarks because Gerald grabbed me over lunch, and I was talking about what we've been doing, and he said, I'd like you to share that. And I said, okay. And then I went back to dealing with teenagers for the last several hours, and that's about as much advanced thought as I got a chance to put into this. But that being said, I wanted to explain what we did this weekend. We understand that for home education to succeed over generations, it is going to have to raise up within home-educated students people who understand how to speak, how to advance their ideas, and how to be convincing and compelling of the truth that they've come to know. Generation Joshua in the United States is HSLDA USA's answer to that, where we equip students, to be able to take the ideas and principles that make home education exist in the United States and then advocate as they mature into adults and citizens as well. We do that in two processes. One of them is practical experience. The other one is a form of simulation or immersion, where we take aspects of government, we bring them to life, we throw the kids into it and say, all right, now you get to swim. Thankfully, we're there to catch them when they kind of wobble, as it were. But it's a great way to learn, which homeschoolers have understood for decades. We learn best with this kind of multisensory, hands-on, immersive education. Government's one of the more complicated things to do at home. Unless your family's really big, you probably don't have a full parliamentary system running. That being said, if you do, we should have a conversation. That could be very interesting. But we take it, and we'll take it together for a weekend or so and put something together. In this case, we did a model United Nations. So a handful of the teenagers here became the ambassadors for a variety of different countries. And I must confess, I was particularly impressed by this crew. And I work with a lot of homeschoolers. I think at this point, I just realized over the last 15 years, I've gotten to train about 30,000 homeschool high school students. That's a lot of homeschoolers. And that's coming from someone who was a homeschooler myself. I was homeschooled, had to convince my mom to do it. She didn't want to. She said, we'll try it for a year, and yeah, we saw how that went. Now we're homeschooling our own kids. We got to show our kids how this program worked. They got to take the responsibility from Poland to the United Kingdom, to the state of Japan, Israel, Saudi Arabia. They were all there. And they hashed through a fairly complex question. And the question we gave a bunch of unprepared high schoolers was, in modern society, with war on terror and disruptions and cyber warfare and all the different drones and how they're being used nowadays, if you were going to update the Geneva Convention, which is not exactly a light document, how would you do it in a modern day? And they took 2 days, and they did so. And they went through, line by line, working through process, updating it for a question of how you deal with non-state actors, how you deal with terrorists, how you deal with religious and political leaders who also function as paramilitary organizations. They dealt with questions of human rights. They dealt with questions of national security. And they did it taking the education that you've given them and applying it directly into real-world problems, learning how to speak, learning how to lead other people, learning how to carry ideas in an effective and compelling way, sitting down and working in committees. These kids, I think one of them was 11, okay? And they did a remarkable job. We had a 5-page treaty over the course of about 18 hours, where they had put together everything from enactment clauses to amendment processes to operational language to legal definitions. And admittedly, several of them noticed that IEW was a sponsor here, and they were terrified because they realized that their legal language was not going to pass muster. That being said, I gave them a pass. I said legal language and proper English do not always agree. And they said, okay, we can keep moving. And they had a great time, though. If you're interested in it, let us know. We'll get you a copy to let you see what they made. But they walked out all having learned how to take what they believe and understand and explain it to someone they've never met before. And if we're going to advance as a homeschool community around the world, every country is going to have to raise up homeschoolers that are not just the parents who homeschool their kids, but those kids who then become the leaders and pick up that baton and continue advancing freedom in each of those areas. This is how we do it in the United States. We were so pleased to share it with the students here. We had a great time. And I will note this, I told Gerald this on my last comment. I work with a lot of homeschool kids. As a rule, they are a cut above most of the other students we get to work with. Not everyone, there's your edge cases, right? But most of them are, on average, significantly above the national averages we run into. This group here was one of the best I've ever gotten to work with. And it was truly a privilege. So, thank you so much. All right, thank you. That was good stuff. Thanks, Joel.
Joel, thank you. Thank you for the training, for the experience, for the immersion that happened in this program, and it's just so thrilling to hear about that. Our next speaker is my partner, Kevin Boden. Kevin, come on up. Kevin is the Secretary of the Global Home Education Exchange. Kevin is a lawyer that represents 12 states across the United States in home education, and he leads the international division of HSLDA, and really is a man that stands behind and under and over this conference. And Kevin is going to be talking to us about casting a vision for the future of the Global Home Education Exchange. But Kevin, first of all, I want to say thank you. Thank you for just this partnership that's a lot of fun.
What will home education look like in your country in 2 years? What will it look like in 5 years? What about 10? Will the numbers grow or will they shrink? Will the regulation increase or will the landscape look more free? Across the world, home education is both growing in great numbers and experiences, and it also has many challenges and restrictions that we face. Many of those we've heard this week. As we've seen across the globe, politicians come and go. Political agendas shift and change. Regulations on education are increased and relaxed. Nations form alliances and dissolve those alliances. Cultural patterns shift. Pedagogical ideas are pressed upon us, some of which we appreciate and some of which we don't. Change is always occurring. The home education environment and community changes also. But what doesn't change, what has not changed since the beginning of time, since the first two created humans on the earth, is parent-directed home education. Long before nations were created, long before political alliances were formed, long before countries set up compulsory education schemes and forced children away from their families, long before these occurred, parents taught their children. Home education is the oldest and most established form of education in the world. It's the most enduring of educational institutions, and it is governed by the educators with the greatest investment and commitment. That is the love and commitment of parents towards their own children. It is this long-time model of parent-directed home education that brings together the Global Home Education Exchange. Since the first Global Home Education Conference in Berlin in 2012 to our event this week here in Manchester 12 years later, the work of the Global Home Education Exchange and community has continued. Together, we've hosted conferences. I say we, of course, this is you. I'm a newcomer to this community. Regional conferences, online summits, numerous webinars, research projects. We've influenced and advocated for families in dozens of countries, and yet the work somehow is just beginning. The Global Home Education Exchange, or GHEX, is an international network with a mission to advance, connect, and equip the global home education community, and we do this through advocacy, outreach, and research in our regional committees. Advocacy is critical because we believe it necessary, as Russ highlighted, to make a positive contribution to civil society and to families in every country. Outreach is necessary because we know that the movement leaders need support and encouragement. Research is essential because it equips families, leaders, and policymakers to make data-informed decisions and to counter the anti-home education narrative. Suffice it to say, the Global Home Education Exchange has done much over the past decade plus in the home education movement around the world. But as we've heard over the course of this conference, there remains much work to be done. And here are some ways that I think GHEX moves forward in the coming years. First, we strengthen regional committees. GHEX currently has regional committees in Europe, Africa, Latin America, the Middle East, and Asia. And we live in a diverse world, do we not? It's critical that we strengthen these regional committees so that like-minded home educators can partner and collaborate with the countries and the peoples with whom they have the most in common. As you might expect, while there is much advocacy that's cross-geographical, that's supranational, you might say, there is much that is local. GHEX is committed to strengthening the regional committees and working to form committees in those regions where none yet exist. So first, we strengthen the regional committees. Second, we increase the global body of research. It's why the research track at this event is such a critical component. It's essential to the growing community of home educators around the world. Dr. Harriet Pattison mentioned this at the press conference to kick off this event, the importance of data-informed research and rigorous research. And as Gerald mentioned at the opening, we embrace research. Research home educating parents, research home educated students, find the data, because what we know to be true, the researchers will discover with their research. So we don't shy away from research, we embrace it. GHEX has supported research at this event in two ways that you may not know. First, GHEX provided a handful of travel stipends to help researchers attend this event who may not have otherwise been able to come. And we provided a call for proposals and issued awards to the top 3 proposals in order to come and present their proposals at this event. So GHEX is very committed to research. So we strengthen regional committees, we embrace and fund and encourage research, and third, we build national legal advocacy organizations. Some of you may be familiar with HSLDA. It is a bit of an acronym, and I have many that call me that get it wrong. It's usually the L and the S, HLSDA. That's okay. But while regions are important and research is critical, we must look at building legal national organizations. There are dozens of home education advocates at this conference. There are dozens of nations represented, and there's advocates from nations all over the world here. I'm more committed than ever that we have to build these organizations. Nearly every week, perhaps daily, families around the world are being harassed, intimidated, and outright prosecuted in their countries. It occurs in countries where it's illegal outright, like Sweden and Germany. It occurs in places where the legal status is what I would call perhaps murky or unclear, like Brazil and Kenya. And this intimidation occurs in countries where home education is legal, like the UK and the United States. Home education communities in countries around the world must be united around this cause of home education. We may not see eye to eye on every issue that we face, but we do agree that home education should be free for every family in the world to pursue. We agree that parents must have the right to choose what is right and best for their own children. We agree that the rights of parents should not be stripped because of the actions of a few people. We agree that a register for home-educated children is antithetical to a free and democratic society and must be resisted. And I note, as we noted here this week, that these registers are being pushed in the United States and in the United Kingdom. What would it be like? Imagine for a moment a world. What would it be like if every time a family is prosecuted, a national legal advocacy organization steps in and defends them? What if every single time a social worker shows up at the door of a home educating family and overexerts their authority, a national legal advocacy organization supports them? What if every time a government official asks a home educating family for information that's not required in the form of paperwork or data, a national legal defense organization steps in to advocate and help that parent? What if? And what GHEX stands for is to turn these what ifs into a reality for every country on the planet. Can you envision in your mind a world in which home education is freely available and respected as a fundamental right for every family, regardless of motivation or methodology? I hope so. I hope you've gathered this week that that's a reality that's worth fighting for. I want to close this with a message of unity. We must recognize that global home education is a global matter. It's a global effort. It's a global battle, and it's a great opportunity. We may differ in homeschool practice. We may differ in homeschool methodology. We may differ on religious convictions. We may differ in our native languages. We may differ in our family traditions. We may differ in our own academic experiences. And yet, with all of these differences, with all of this uniqueness, we are united in our love for our children. We are united in our desire for educational freedom and in our communities. And we are united in ensuring that home education freedom is both protected and expanded around the world. This, to me, is the vision of the Global Home Education Exchange. I trust and hope that this conference has both affirmed and reaffirmed your commitment to this. And if the prospect of creating a strong regional community for mutual encouragement, if the prospect of robust research, if the prospect of building national advocacy organizations excites you, then I encourage you to join the GHEX community. The global home education community is the most strong when it partners together. Many leaders around the world have joined the GHEX community, including several as board members. And so right now, if you're a current board member or you are on the conference planning committee, I want to invite you up to the stage to be recognized. So a current GHEX board member or a conference committee member, come on up. Don't be bashful, come on up. I know you weren't expecting this, so it's kind of like an audible. So as these folks come up, some of these have planned many conferences over the years. Many of these people before you that are coming down have fought vigorously in their own countries. Many of them have served as advisory board members on the Global Home Education Exchange for many years. Keep coming. So first, would you join me in putting our hands together for this group of people? What Gerald and I wanted you to see was the visible representation. We talk about regional committees, we talk about research, we talk about national advocacy organizations. And as you look across this stage, look at the countries represented, see the cultures represented, see the differences that exist, and yet see the unity of global home education. See what unites every person on the stage together, regardless of differences. What unites us is what I said, which is love for our children and a desire to be home education free and available for every child in every country. So thanks, guys. You can sit down. Edward, sit here. So that concludes my remarks. I want to turn it over to Edric and Gerald for an important announcement.
Before you do that, I'd like to ask Peter Stock he's not far away, so I'm going to ask Peter Stock just to come back up here for a second. I want to specifically acknowledge Peter for his leadership in leading the planning efforts for this Global Home Education Conference in 2024. Peter, your work in pulling together the tracks, the champions, I know the numerous meetings that you chaired and led and guided. And I just want to thank you for the work that you've done and the leadership that you've shown. And just ask if you have any brief comments that you'd like to make. And he shakes his head. Peter, thank you. Appreciate it so much. So, Edric, we have we're looking to the future and we're wondering and we're thinking, and I'd like you to tell us and cast a vision for where could we go? Where do we go from here? Where could we go? Edric, please.
So, rather than say it, I'd like to show it. Can you play the video, please?
A group of families is growing in the Philippines. Lives are being transformed. Relationships strengthened. Families are learning better together. And it's happening through homeschooling. What started in the 80s has grown to over 15,000 homeschoolers in the home of more than 7,000 islands. And we have our own National Homeschool Day. Diverse support groups and homeschool communities are united to guide, encourage, and motivate families in their homeschool journey. So, get ready for the biggest homeschool gathering in Philippine history. Learn from international speakers and discover the latest trends from curated exhibitors. Join us and see why the Philippines is celebrating homeschooling and how it can change your life too. Global Home Education Conference, Philippines, 2026. Hashtag GHEC 2026, Salo Salo.
So it is our joy and privilege to open up our arms to the world. Will you please join us in the next GHEC in the Philippines? And let me just explain that last word you saw, Salu Salo. Can you all say Salu Salo? Salu Salo. That is actually inspired and is a springboard from the amazing words we just heard from Kevin, bringing everybody together. In the Filipino culture, we love gathering together. We love eating and celebrating whatever we can. And so we'd love to join and have everybody together to celebrate this thing we call homeschooling. And again, the invitation is for the whole world. We look forward to seeing you there. Can you look at the person beside you and say, we look forward to seeing you then? And say, Salu Salo. Thank you, everybody. We hope to have you in the Philippines. Back to our chairman, Mr. Gerald Hubner.
Edric, 2026, you told us you have a National Homeschool Day. Our intent is to coordinate with that day. Now that date, just want to make sure I got it right.
It's March 3rd.
So the conference will be built around that celebration. And you know, I am looking forward. We were going to come to the Philippines in 2020 and the world changed. But there was this thing that I was always curious about, this food fight.
Boodle Fest. Okay. You have to see it to experience it. It's a whole spread of food, and you know, for those that have been to the Philippines, I know a number of you have. Yeah, can you raise your hand if you've been to the Philippines? There we go. All right, we're gonna make sure that we feed you and stuff you in a good way, right? So that's what Gerald was saying. So again, please join us in the Philippines. We want to learn from you. We want to celebrate what we have together here and advance the cause of homeschooling. Thank you,
Edric. We're looking forward. We are so much looking forward to 2026 in the Philippines. It's going to be a blast. You know, it's always hard when these conferences come down to close to the end. We anticipate it, we plan it, we travel, we line everything up, and we come together, and then we come to the end. And we say, it went so quickly. We did so much. We met so many great friends, both new and old, and it's so great to be together. I would just like to make a few comments to try to capture a few of the things that I saw. I saw here at this conference the declaration, the proof, the debate, and the evidence that home education works. It was presented over and over and over on purpose, because we were declaring that home education works. We said it works, first of all, for children. And we saw right from the beginning, all through the conference, that the research and the other tracks were talking about the benefits, the impacts, the reasons why home education works for children. That the research showed that it was providing both a social and academic education that worked well, because it met, and so often we heard the speakers, the individual and special needs of children. We heard how families needed to be and were the foundation that we needed to build on. And we heard over and over that home education works for families. It provides an environment. It provides a climate. It provides a place and a way and a framing of building family around this thing called home education or family education or whatever the title is that your country uses. But it works for families, and it works well. It fosters and grows and encourages families. It works for communities. We heard how it changes communities. It helps grow communities. It helps build good citizens. It helps build civil society around them. And the things that were impacting the children, the families, impact the communities. It works for countries, and we heard how there were issues in the educational systems in countries around the world that were challenged, and home education offers solutions and ways and means that go beyond the funding and go beyond the limitations that are so often limiting the government policies. Home education places the tools in the hands of families to be able to address the things that they need. So often we want a big solution to be put forward by some institution, by some authority. All we really want in home education is for families to be enabled to deal with things in their family, in front of them, in their house, in their community. And in that way, the additive effect, the cumulative effect is it impacts. It impacts communities, it impacts countries. And through it, it impacts the world. We heard about the youth program here and how it was building leadership. And I think that that's what's happening around the world in home education, is that leaders are being raised up. In my opening comments, I talked about how it's not about educating just our children. It's the reality that we are raising, we are enabling, we are equipping, and we are building future generations by your teaching of the teachers of your grandchildren and then generations to come. It works for the world because it provides connection. It provides compassion. It provides understanding that goes beyond the bounds of nations and states. And I think that we've seen that here in our movement. We're committed that it's something that is not limited to certain places, to certain cultures, to certain religions, to certain economic and ethnic groups. It works for everyone, everywhere, regardless of their motivation or their methodology. It crosses those things like few other things in the world do, because parents love their children. We've heard that over and over. It's because parents love their children. Home education works. We have a declaration that is released here at this conference. It's on our website. I'm not going to read it all, but really this conference, throughout its many sessions, many speakers, many panels, declared that home education works. It works for children. It works for families. It works for communities. It works for countries. It works for the world, for everyone, everywhere. We declare that home education works. What we want to do now is take that to our families, take that to our communities, take that to our countries, and declare it to the world that home education works. Because it's not the problem, it's the solution. It's the solution for building strong families all around the world. And I'm looking forward to continuing to see the impacts as Kevin has laid out the challenge and the vision as we continue to work together and build into the future. I thank you all for being here. I thank you all for your investment, for your time, for investing in this movement. But in doing that, investing in your families and in your communities. Thank you for coming. We have a reception that'll follow over that way. And we look forward to some further visiting, but thank you for coming, and all the best as you travel home. And just let's keep doing this. Let's keep declaring. Let's keep working together, because it is building something that goes far beyond us and is worth it, because home education works. Thank you for coming. God bless.